Hello, this is Dora Tarver from e-projectmanagers.com, and in this lesson we're going to learn some basics about how to set up your project schedule. Now, typically in project launches you will probably see a few things pop up, and what I recommend is you should first go to your menu option Tools and select Options and configure your environment so that you can work from there. Basically, some of the things that you'll want to do are make sure that your date format is set up to reflect your start and finish dates in the format that you would like to see them in. So you can set up your date format in your project schedule from this drop-down list box. Personally, I like to see the day, date, and time. And on this screen, that's pretty much all that, on this tab, that's pretty much all that I'll change. On the General tab, I'll usually set Open Last File on Startup, because typically I'm in a schedule that I'm working on and I'll want to come back to it when I come back in to the program. So if you check on Open Last File on Startup, then the last file you're working on will automatically open. The other thing that I have checked here is Recently Used List. In other words, if you're working on multiple projects and you have multiple project schedules, you can see all the files that you've last used, and you can define how many, however many you want to be able to see, depending on how many project schedules you're working on. Of course, you'll have your username. You can also control your undo levels, meaning when you're in project and you want to change something, you hit undo. In my case, I have kept the default, which was 20. Undo levels. And this is on the General tab. On the Edit tab, I usually don't change anything. On the Calendar tab, I go in and I make sure that my work week is set up. So if it's an 8-hour workday or a 7-hour workday, and let's say 32 hours a week, you can define your workday here. If your workday starts at 9 a.m. and ends at, in my case, let's say 5, but let's say yours ended at 6. You can control this, okay, via this. And once you've set this up, it'll appear, all of your tasks will be based within the time frame that you've defined here. Work week starts on a Sunday, or you can say it starts on a Monday or a Saturday. It depends on how you want to schedule things. I usually leave everything else as default. I don't change anything with spelling. Sometimes I will, depending on the environment I'm in. On the Save tab, I'll make sure I auto-save every so many minutes. Sometimes I find that helpful. I generally allow Project to automatically do the calculations, which I know can be an issue sometimes, which we'll get into in other versions, but I usually leave this on. I don't change anything under calculation. And on the Schedule tab, I don't change anything here as well. I'm just looking through these other ones here. Under the Interface tab, I don't change this detail, and for security I don't change that as well. So pretty much when you come in, View, I recommend changing your date format on the View tab. On the General tab, define if you want to view your last open file and how many files that you want to be able to see to select from. Have your name, your undo level set, and then on the Calendar I define the work day. So it's pretty much a View, General, and Calendar that I'll modify. Everything else I'll keep as default. And then you just click on OK. It saves these changes. Another detail I want to point out to you I would call is basic formatting. When you create a project schedule, let's just say this is our test schedule here. I'm going to call this Project Test. That's the name of my project. And within Project Test, I have the standard project phases, initiation. Oops. If I hit F2, by the way, you can automatically edit the field that you're in. So I enter my initiation phase, planning phase, execution, and control. I'm hitting F2, and then phase, and let's say close out phase. Now all of these phases I'm going to indent under the project name, and of course within each phase there'll be various tasks that you'll set up, and just for our test purposes I'm just going to write the word add tasks, and I'm going to hit Control Insert and then Shift Insert to paste that in there. I'm going to indent that, Shift Insert here, indent that, Shift Insert here, indent that. And within each phase, besides having tasks, I'll also have milestones. So I'm just going to say add milestones, and I'm going to get into later specifically what tasks and milestones you'll want to add. But for now, this is just a placeholder so that you can see how I format these. Actually, let me just copy the one that I have above here. Control Insert, Shift Insert, Insert key adds a new row, Shift Insert adding the same thing that I copied. Hitting the Insert key adds a new row, Shift Insert adds that in there. Now, for a milestone, I'm going to change the duration to 0. And of course, your project schedule will have as many milestones as you need. Let's just say for task, this is a 3-day task, this is a 4-day task, this is a 2-day task, this is a 6-day task. And let's just say I have a final milestone for when the project is complete, and the duration is 0. Okay, now in terms of formatting, one of the first things you're going to do once you start building your schedule is format the text for your tasks and for your milestones and for items that are on your critical path. And the way you do that is you go to the menu item Format and you select Text Styles, and for milestones you select the milestone task from this drop down list box. It says items to change. I just selected milestone tasks, and I'm going to change the color for all my milestones to be blue. I'm not going to change the font, although if you wanted to you could do that, but I just want my milestones to be blue. And you can see now all my milestones are blue. Anything that has a duration of 0 is now blue. Another thing I typically do is I set my text styles for critical tasks. I want my critical tasks to appear red. I want them to stand out so I'll know they're on the critical path and I can keep an eye out on them more easily. So again, you can change the font style and the font face and the size as well, but I just typically change the color, and then I click on OK. Now, as you know, right now there isn't a lot of detail in this project schedule. Let's say you also want to format your Gantt chart. And I'm going to get back into the critical path here, but first I want to show you something. If you look at the date and days that you see here in the Gantt chart at the top, where my mouse is pointing right now, if you hold your mouse over this and right click, select the menu item Timescale, now you can see the same day format that we were just looking at, and we can change this. So right now the timescale options says there are 2 tiers, which we see: a month, the month, day, the month, week, and year, and then the days of that week. So there are 2 tiers, the middle and the bottom, that have been formatted. But let's say you want to make 3 tiers. You can do that. Just go to the top tier. Notice how it's grayed out because it says 2 tiers. It's going to use the middle and the bottom. But let's say you want 3 tiers. So let's go ahead and select 3 tiers. See, when you select 3 tiers, it says top, middle, and bottom. If you selected 2 tiers, it says middle and bottom. And if you selected 1 tier, it'd be middle. And those refer to the tabs that you would use to edit the dates within these tiers. So anyway, I just selected 3 tiers. And what I want to do is, let's say on the top level tier, I want to see the month. and the year. So you can see that there are different formats that you can select, but I'm just going to keep the month and the year as it is by default. So I see the month and the year, because sometimes you have a project that runs over multiple years, and you'll want to be able to see that in the schedule. In the middle tier, let's say I want to track this by quarters. Okay, so what's happening here is we're getting a message because the middle tier can't be by quarter if the top tier is by month. The middle tier has to be a smaller time frame. So we're going to have to go in and change the top tier from month to quarter, and the middle tier can be month and the bottom tier can be another section. So what we're going to do is I want to display this level as month. I want to see the months, and let's just say change this to month within the year, and then at the bottom tier I'm going to display the weeks. I don't want to look at the day because that's too much information up front. So, and actually now that I'm looking at this, I'm going to change the top level to quarters. Okay, so that was the reason why we got that error message before. Now we can see the quarter at the very top. And let me go back to the middle. I'm going to change that to month with year. Okay, so now we can see first quarter of that year, the month of the year, and then the weeks within that month. Okay, so again, how that happened was on the top tier, I have quarters set. Originally I tried to set quarters on the middle tier, but it gave me the error message because I already had months set on top tier. So I went back to top tier and changed that to quarters. And I formatted my quarters to appear as first quarter in the year. Of course, you can change you can select other options for quarter, whichever you'd like to see. You can also control how big it appears by percentage. By reducing the percentage, you'll change how much space you see for any of these tabs here. You can control that. Typically I leave this as 100% because I don't want it to be too squished together, but you can play with that. It may be something you want to modify. Okay, so now I have this new format, and the bottom tier, let's see, I think I want to include, let me just double check to see what my options are here. Okay. Yeah, I think I prefer just the date, the month and day, and not the year. Okay. I could also modify the non-working time, but I'm not going to do that. By default, you see in the background here, Saturday and Sunday appears the way it does. You could change that if you wanted to, but I'm not going to change that. Anyway, once you're done adjusting the time scale, just click on OK, and you can see now that it's modified. Now I'm just going to add copy task, paste. I can also hit Shift Insert with my keyboard, and that also adds tasks, just to add some more detail in here. Now that we have a few tasks in here, and let's just say I'm going to actually add a few milestones. I usually have a beginning milestone and a closing milestone within each phase, so I know when that phase begins and when it completes. So you can use menu options. What I'm doing is I click on the row which I want the pasted item to appear above, or you can just click on the row and then hit Shift Insert to insert whatever you've copied into your buffer. So there's a couple of different ways to copy and paste, as you can see. Alright, another thing that I'll typically do is I'll run the Gantt chart wizard. Now I'm going to move this down here since I'm in 800 by 600 resolution. I want to make sure you see everything. Your toolbars typically have a Gantt chart wizard toolbar button. And if you click on that, it pops you up into this dialog box, and you simply just step through the dialog box. The Gantt chart wizard allows you to customize how your Gantt chart will look. So I'm going to click on Next, and what kind of information do you want to display? I want to see, well, I'm going to build a custom Gantt chart. Okay. I don't want to select these, although I could, but I want to put in my own information. So I click on Next, and here it's asking me what I want to display as the critical path. I'm going to accept the default red. That's fine with me. It's also asking me to select the style options for Gantt bars representing critical path, and I'm going to keep it as red as it is here. Selecting the style for Gantt bars representing normal task, I'm going to keep that as blue, although I could change it to other colors, but I'm going to leave that as blue. You can change your lines or the shapes. Going on, hit Next. For Gantt chart items representing summary task, you can change the color, or the pattern, the style, the end shape if you wanted to. I usually leave the default as it is. Select the style options for symbols representing milestones. I like the black with the diamond. You could, again, select any color you want. You can change the shape for a milestone. I think it's a industry standard, though, to see milestones represented in the way that it is by default, so I typically leave that shape. Then we come to this part of the dialog box of the Gantt chart wizard, and it asks, what kind of additional Gantt bars do you want to display? I like to see baseline and slack, and what that'll show you is if you have time after a task, your slack, it'll put a little bar after the task. Notice that tasks that don't have a bar are in red because those are on the critical path. That means there's no slack, meaning if they slip, your project is going to slip. If you just want to see baseline, baseline is this white area here. Like, if you want to see total slack, you can just look at that. If you want to see none, changes to display on the Gantt chart, you can select none. But again, baseline and slack is typically what I select. A baseline Gantt bar shows the planned dates of a task, and if you baseline your project schedule, then you'll be able to see what you had planned and what actually happens. So anyway, selecting baseline and slack, clicking on Next. What task information do you want to display in your Gantt bars? I usually select custom task information, and it'll prompt me for what I want to put in. But if you want to select resources and dates, if you want to see a resource name and the date, you could do that. If you want to see just resources, if you want to see just dates, start and end date, you can see them in this preview window over here, or nothing, you can leave it like that. Again, I'm going to select custom task information and click on Next. And because I selected that, it's asking me now, what task information do you want to display on your normal Gantt bars? So in the beginning, I like to have the start date, and I typically don't put anything inside because the Gantt bar has a color and it's usually difficult to read, but you could put something inside if you wanted to. You could put percent complete, you know, whatever you wanted to. You can be creative. There's no one way to work with Microsoft Project. And on the right, I'll typically put finish date. It's asking the same question for how I want to display the summary Gantt bar. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select start and finish for left and right sides. And I'm not going to put anything on the inside. And what information do you want to display for your milestone symbols? And basically for me, I'm just going to put, well, you know, the milestone will have one date, and so I'm just selecting a finish date. It'll appear on the right. Click Next. Do you want to show link lines between dependent tasks? I like that. This arrow here is a link line, and it's showing that these tasks are linked by predecessor details. So I'm going to keep that as it is. Click on Next. It says I'm done. If I want to now apply this, I click on Format, and it is now finished. Clicking on Exit And I have this information in here. Now, just to show you something with this example schedule that we have created, okay, let me save this. Hold on. Okay, I'm just going to call this setting up MS project. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Okay, so now it's saved. In the predecessor, I want to show you something here. I have no predecessor setup. I didn't put in that anything is dependent on anything before it starts. But watch what happens to the Gantt chart as I do put in predecessor information. So let me just remove my view bar so I have more room here so you can see everything. I'm going to the menu option view, and I'm going to check off. I'm going to click here, and that will cause it to be checked off, and it goes away because it's gone. Alright, so now we see more information. Now, so the project begins. Let's say you've planned your first task to start. It's going to be dependent on this milestone. Oops. This milestone. So this milestone is task number 3, and if this task is dependent on this task starting, then the predecessor will be number 3. Now notice when I typed in number 3, this little arrow appeared here, and if you hold your mouse over here, it says task link start and finish from ID 3 add milestone to ID 4 add task. And just to give you a little bit probably better view of this, I'm going to say I'm going to call this add milestone. I'm going to call this begin initiation phase. And what I'm doing is if I select this row and hit F2, I can hit Shift Home, highlight the whole thing, hit Control Insert, then hit my right arrow key or end key and hit Enter, and then go down here, hit F2, hit Shift Home, it highlights the whole thing, Shift Insert, and I hit my Home key to go to the front of this row. I'm deleting the word begin, and I hit my End key to go to the end, and I type at the end complete. So I have begin initiation phase, complete. Okay, these are my 2 milestones, and these are my tasks. So let's just say this task can't start until the phase begins. And this, let's say this task, number 2, can't start until task number 1 is complete. So task number 1 is number 4. So I'm typing in number 4 here. And notice it turned red because there's no slack. We'll adjust that in a minute. But initiation phase complete, and that'll be done when task 5, task ID number 5, which we have as this row here, is done. So I'm going to type in 5. Okay, so now let's just say that we want to change the duration of these tasks. Let's just say this is a 5-day task, and let's just give this some additional time. Let's say it ends on, instead of January 10th, January 14th. Okay, so now because I made this task end on January 14th, that means both task 1 and 2 have some slack. So they have a little line here, and that's why they're no longer on the critical path, and they're no longer red. Okay, so when you add in your predecessors, you'll be able to see the task link line for each task. And if you have tasks that do not have any slack because we formatted the schedule, they'll appear in red. It's always best to create tasks with slack. That leaves room for just in case things happen, which typically do happen. So you always want to leave room for unknowns in your project schedule. All right. So that's all that we're going to look at today. Again, this is just a brief overview of how to set up your project schedule. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. And if you'd like to see something else elaborated on in more detail, or another piece of information you want to know about Microsoft Project that you've always puzzled about, Please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy to help. And have an excellent day. Thank you.